Welcome back to the EV OG podcast. I'm going to introduce, but this is on Brian's channel, and we've got a lot to talk about Fisker, about ourselves, about EVs in general, some refreshes. It's a deep dive, Brian. What do you think?
Yeah, man, it's long overdue. There's been a lot of motion in the ocean, so to speak, right? So very much looking forward to getting into this. I don't know. There was a bit of calm silence, before the storm of the last week or so of activity in the ocean. So let's definitely get into it. I remember your video with Bill, right? It was titled In and Out, right?
Yes.
This one is out and out.
That's correct.
out and about. So why don't we start there? Life outside the ocean, right? So you've got a new Honda Prologue. I've got
Yes.
a used XC40, right?
Yes.
So we're going to go with two questions around that topic. The first one is, what do you miss about the ocean and Fisker in general? I'll let you go first.
Okay.
Because I think you'll be quick.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, I can sum it up very quickly and say I miss nothing. I didn't have a solar roof, and I didn't have the car without a going concern. And that's probably why I have this answer, but I miss absolutely nothing. Now, there are some things I miss because remember, in order for me to get out, I had to sacrifice a absolutely perfect service-free for 3 years, 20,000 mile Model Y, completely scrap it and take all the equity that I had paid down as a loss. So I do miss Century Mode on it. I do miss the app on it. However, the Prologue is really close on the app functionality. It's just, it's OEM slow. But yeah, that's it. I miss a couple things in the Tesla app. When it comes to the Fisker, though, man, good riddance.
Well, I was watching something today, and they were talking about the bankruptcy, which we'll get to, and the situation with Fisker. And I think they made reference to one of your videos or one of mine. But you just reminded me about it when you talked about the fact that in order to get out of the ocean, right, you had to sacrifice your Model Y, right? And yes. In my case, right, I actually had to pay a little bit more in order to get into our Volvo XC40, right? And so I think that's important for people to understand, because as I'm kind of monitoring the forums now, more and more people now with the bankruptcy filing and some of the fallout from that, which we'll get to, I can see more people looking to get out, right? And I think it's important for us to help them understand that in addition to taking the loss, there might be an additional expense or hit associated with doing so. Would you agree with that statement?
100%. I can give you an example of a viewer. He did a Solterra on a trade. They took it. I actually got an extremely good trade. It's like $29,000, but there was an additional multiple $1,000 cost that he had to put down in addition to his down payment on the lease to lease this Solterra, and that all of it making his lease payment much closer to what buying a Solterra would cost. But yeah, I made all those payments on fees and destination and all that. And then, and this is very similar to your situation as well, because there's a great video on your channel that has all this information in your case. Definitely check that out. But yeah, I had to, you pay the taxes, you paid the fees, you paid the destination, you pay to register, and I lost $9,000 in equity on my Fisker Ocean, and I put no down payment basically on my Prologue. I financed 100% of the value because it was my only way out. And I know we'll talk about EV discounts and leases later, specifically on the Prologue, but there's no way to convince me what I got was a good deal because it's gone. I don't have to deal with it.
Yeah. Well, we're happy to help others because we've obviously walked this path. But the net of the point we're trying to make here is that in order to get out of the ocean, right, there's some additional penance to be paid, unfortunately. But there's tons of options, which we'll get to in terms of the new and used car market. In terms of what I miss, though, with the ocean, it's little things, right? It's
like the cup holders. I'm just kidding. Sorry.
Definitely not the cup holders. For me, it's the reminders, right? And maybe it's reflective of a certain age that I'm at, where I like using the wireless Qi chargers, but the Ocean had, every time I opened the door, if my phone was still sitting on that wireless charger, it would beep and let me know, hey, you're forgetting your phone, right? If I'm at a traffic light, as you know, we had the traffic light reminder, hey, the light's green, let's get ready to go. And I don't know how many times, man, in little over a month now that I've been out of the ocean, that those little things have sort of bubbled up as little things that I appreciated about the ocean that I no longer have. The only other one I would mention, well, really there's two of them. The backup camera on the Volvo XC40 is not great. And it sort of defaults to that, right? So it does have 360 cameras, but it defaults to the backup camera. And it's literally this big of a view. So it looks like you're looking through a periscope, and trying to deal with that at night is no fun. The only other thing I would mention is the sound system, right? Obviously, being an Ocean One owner, we had the top of the line audio system, the L's audio, I guess is what they called it. And even with a 13 speaker Harman Kardon system, the Ocean definitely has had a much better sound system. But other than that, I'm happy to put that behind us and be moving ahead. And the more I learn about this Volvo XC40, the more I think it's a great EV option. I would not buy it new at 60 plus K for it, but having gotten almost a 50% discount on that vehicle, it's a great car for what we paid and a great replacement. So what don't you miss about the Ocean and Fisker?
Well, I'll just be super granular and super quick at the same time. Stereo, by the way, in the Sport may be the worst stereo. If you buy a Toyota Corolla base model or a Honda Civic LX, I know from experience those have better stereos than my Ocean did. So I don't miss the stereo, but also the key fob. The app never worked. The mud flaps destroyed themselves with less than 1,500 miles. I had constant anxiety about whether it was going to die or whether it was going to roll backwards. The entry order of operations, if you don't want to have an error, you have to become basically a robot to get in. You have to specific order, unlock, get in, close door, don't touch brake yet, buckle up, and that was horrible. The cup holders we mentioned already as a joke, but they literally are a joke. They were poorly engineered and totally an afterthought. It reminds me of like a 90s Saab that had none because Europe. The wireless charger did not work for me. They didn't do enough engineering to test it on different cases. The rubber was way too thick. I'm glad it worked for you. It did not work for me. So I never had those reminders because I never used the charger. I had to plug it in like I was in, let's say, a Honda Civic. There was no glove box. And that taco tray was probably cool, but it was probably just the cheapest way to finish that part of the car. And the phantom drain. There's no excuse for that. It didn't keep itself cool. It wasn't running cabin overheat protection. It just ate itself because it was poorly engineered. So that's the short list. There's the short list.
Well, I'll add one to it that's a no-brainer, right? The key fob situation. Definitely don't miss that. I don't miss the software, all of it, right? Every aspect of it.
TomTom.
Yeah, it was kind of funny to see TomTom as a creditor on the bankruptcy filing, which we'll get to. But yeah, the Volvo XC40 runs Android Automotive, much like your Prologue does and the GM cars. So definitely love that. Still haven't tried the CarPlay situation yet. I've never felt the need to use CarPlay, but looking forward to giving that a try. So key fob, software, and then the lack of a frunk, right? The fact that the Volvo actually has one is definitely some additional storage space and utility that I appreciate. So, like I said, those were the things to break the ice in terms of what we do miss and what we don't miss about the Fisker Ocean. So, with that being said, now let's shift gears and get to the elephant in the room, right? The bankruptcy filing. So, they filed Chapter 11 with sort of a tagline of wanting to sell all of their assets, right? And those two things seem to be incongruent in that Chapter 11 is usually about restructuring versus liquidation, right? If you want to liquidate, it should be Chapter 7. And so I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that. Obviously, you did a video early last week as the stuff was coming out. But what else have you learned? What additional thoughts do you have to share?
A good example is InfoWars. I don't know if you're familiar with that, or I'm not talking about political affiliation, and I have no opinion of InfoWars, but he was sued by the Sandy Hook victims and basically bankrupted his company. But he also personally went bankrupt, and he has done kind of the same smoke and mirrors situation that Fisker has. Obviously not exactly the same, but the whole point was to continue to pay himself and the members of his family that were involved. And I believe the Chapter 11 filing, in my opinion, is Fisker's exact same attempt. They want to continue to keep themselves on the payroll as long as possible. There is no other reason. I can give you some examples of why, but there is no other reason. In fact, if you want me to go into further detail, the cars are being negotiated right now by American Leasing. That is an Uber and Lyft lease company for New York City. Those are going to be sold, at least so far. That's what the rumor is, to them. All remaining, that's 4,300 Oceans, are going to American Leasing. If that happens, there's nothing left. In fact, I can tell you exactly what's left if you give me just a second. 180 assembly robots, an entire underbody line, a paint shop, and other specialized tools. That is literally all that remains outside of the 4,300 vehicles that are being sold to American Leasing. And in my opinion, those are not worth $500 million, which is what Fisker's opinion of them is. Also, the bankruptcy court is saying Chapter 7 is the only way. They've also been liquidating assets outside of bankruptcy court, and that's all because of this Heights Financial, which we thought was the biggest creditor, the note holder. Well, turns out U.S. Bank is owed $800 million just alone. And so what we also know is that Fisker basically, and this is, once again, I'm all the way into the speculation zone here, but it doesn't look like on paper Fisker paid anyone very much of anything ever throughout the entire existence of the company.
Yeah, based on the numbers that were in the filing, that again, I really appreciate what you've done for the community or anyone looking to understand the details of this bankruptcy filing. Really appreciate the research that you did to really expose all the details, at least that were filed in that document. But this is where I think it's starting to get super interesting, right? In that article, Heights Capital Management, right? That's obviously a subsidiary of Susquehanna, the note holder, right? But like you said, with U.S. Bank and others, these are other creditors that are now challenging and pushing back on Susquehanna, Heights Capital, however we want to refer to that entity, right? Taking control of the company. And in essence, really since November, maybe early this year, right? Starting a liquidation process, prior to filing bankruptcy, right? Lawyers for those other creditors are challenging Susquehanna's position to say, wait a minute, how did you get to the front of the line, right? And they've actually said in one of those articles that I saw that really the bankruptcy filing probably should have taken place back in November, right? And so that bit of drama with the creditors going at each other, I find super, super interesting. Towards the end of that article, which I will link that article in the description of the video, there was an attorney for the DOJ bankruptcy watchdog that essentially said what you've just communicated, which is once those vehicles have been sold, and we did see that article indicating that there's a tentative deal with a single buyer for all 4,300 of them. Once that sale takes place, then we need to shift gears from chapter 11 to chapter 7 is what she is expecting. So it really does not look like there's any real path forward. And it really looks like A, chapter 11 should not have been the filing, and B, whatever the filing is, it should have happened much, much sooner to give all creditors an opportunity to recoup some of what they've got owed.
I've looked around here, and obviously when they filed the GmbH Austria unit, that was that same number, $500 million.
Right.
I don't know how many of these parts are bespoke to Fisker, and if they are, then once again, the value just becomes fractions of what the actual cost of these things are to get, unless somebody wants to buy them. The 4G may stop. That was a Motor Trend article. They asked all the questions, and half of the questions are maybes.
Yeah.
Is the 4G going to work? Maybe. Is the navigation going to work? Maybe. If the navigation works in the future, it's going to be a charge from T-Mobile, and they've kind of got you wrapped around their finger. I mean, $100 a month? I mean, how much do you want to pay for it? They can ask whatever they want. They could ask for a full cellular service plan, which is around $100 a month if you don't have them already. So who knows? But it just doesn't look good.
Yeah, and in terms of owners getting out this late in the game, one of the things that I saw is that the trade-in value, and that's in and of itself a little bit touch and go, right? It's if you can find somebody that will take this vehicle in trade at this point. But the value that I'm seeing now, and we talked about this, I know you did, in terms of getting out of the ocean, as did I on this channel, that it needed to happen quickly because it's a downward spiral that we're seeing. The number I'm seeing now in terms of trade-in value, if you can get it, is $15K, right? So, like I said earlier, man, it's been a month, less than 5 or 6 weeks since, I got, 28? And now it's almost half that number that we're looking at. So,
right.
Yeah, it's shit show is the word that's been thrown out there, and it just continues.
The remaining ocean owners are going to be people who can afford to keep them on the road. Everything is going to become boutique expensive. Everything, other than a tire rotation or maybe brakes if you're lucky. But I doubt you're going to find, and just like we couldn't find someone to buy them when they were, when the values were plummeting, you're not going to be able to find someone to even put it up on the lift. You're going to drive it to your local service shop and say, hey, you guys got tires? They're going to say, get that thing out of here. No one's going to want anything to do with these cars. So the people that continue to own them are going to be people who are their third cars for families. You have a special place in the garage to keep it. And then the question for me becomes, what are you representing at that point? A predatory loan, a very, in my opinion, 100% opinion, obvious con job, and all that. And speaking of that, none of that came up at that India conference, right?
Well, yeah. So one other thing before we get too far off the point of people getting out of the ocean.
Sure.
we'd be remiss if we didn't recognize that there are some people who just either are stuck or feel like they are stuck.
Yes.
Right. And definitely feel for those folks, have a world of empathy for them. And, I think I can speak for you in saying that our hope for those folks is that they can, as you said, keep those cars on the road for as long as possible, right? Have a situation where the vehicle continues to work. We're up here in Massachusetts, and yesterday we went into southern Boston area and went to Costco. And as we were walking in, I saw a white Fisker Ocean. They were dropping off someone to go in to Costco, I guess, before they went ahead and parked. And I don't know, it was nostalgic a little bit, seeing one in the wild, but I also felt for those folks knowing, there's no real future for the vehicle. So again, hopefully they can keep those vehicles running for as long as possible. Before we come back to Henrik keynoting at that summit late last week in India, I wanted to ask about the recall, right? Because the recall ties into getting service and support for the vehicle. But what are your thoughts on the recall, Adam?
So, in my opinion, it was known for months. I knew about it way before it happened, or at least the rumors of it. Obviously, several former Fisker employees of different tiers and different assignments and tasks have been in contact with me. And so I had an idea this recall was coming. I didn't report on it because I can't report on anything that's not published. At least I don't feel comfortable. And something like this, you don't report a recall as a rumor because I just feel like that could be considered fear-mongering. But yeah, the recall is going to be 2.0 had big problems. I had big problems. No, my wife
had big problems.
Yeah. You had an acceleration issue, which is really, really scary. And I had a braking issue, which those are probably the two scariest things that can happen to you in a vehicle. So, and those were 2.0. And 2.1 is absolutely nothing new. It is simply a bug fix, federally mandated by this recall. And Fisker pushed it out as this, oh, hey, great new software for these discounted vehicles, when really it was just a preemptive strike at this recall. And a lot of people have gotten 2.1. In fact, many folks have, but it has already proven to come with new problems. And at the end of the day, when there's no testing and there's no, big fleet to test, and it's just all rolled out of necessity, this is what you end up with. And I mean, it's just like your computer. There's constant updates. It's just like
but all those updates, right, are vetted by a QA department, right, that goes in and tests, like you said. In Fisker's case, at best, it's a very limited QA process that it's going to go through. It's software, so bugs are going to be inherent. And this very point was the thing that gave me the kick in the pants I needed to get out of the ocean very quickly, right? After my experience with version 2.0, where I'd mashed the pedal and would not get any acceleration, right? Not only does that impact the experience, but it's a safety issue, right? When you go to accelerate for any reason on the road and you're not able to get the response from the vehicle, that becomes a safety issue, much like braking.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that's one aspect of it. But the other interesting aspect of the recall, Adam, were the numbers that we saw, right? I think we saw numbers in terms of all oceans globally totaling north of 11,000 and U.S. oceans totaling just under 7,000. I think it was like 6,800. If it's north of 11,000 globally, that would seem to indicate that Magna did some production in January before they shut down, right? And either that or the number is misreported, right? Because the 10K indicated 10,300. Any thoughts on the numbers we saw there in the recall notice?
I know the first article that came out said 18,000, so I don't trust any of those published numbers.
Yeah.
It's like I said, you said the 10K, that's the number I'm going to go by. That's the legal binding document to the SEC. You just got to work from that.
Right.
And so, anybody can, journalism is just like software, release now, correct later. So I feel the same way about that. In fact, I do that all the time. I make mistakes and I have to come back and correct them. So that's how I feel about those numbers. I don't think, but like I said, the update, the software, the future of all that it's never going to get any better than what it is right now. It's just, this is where you're at. And I know now, and I've had multiple people, in fact, send me screenshots of, 4 hours on the phone. I had one person send me a message that said, I sat on the phone open to close all day yesterday. Nobody answered the Fisker number. And that's the only place, support at Fisker Inc. is maybe the only other, but that's just for me, that's just an empty inbox. So there's no way to contact them. So if you do have a problem, that's what you're stuck with it. There you are.
Yeah, and this is what we were afraid of, right? This is what we saw coming down the line. I don't know that we necessarily expected it to happen this quickly, right? But this was the going concern for owners in terms of why we felt we needed to get out of the ocean as quickly as possible. But one of the things that you mentioned was Henrik, coming out of his cave, so to speak, last week to make a public appearance. And we thought that this was something that would happen in person, right? I actually thought he was going to show up at this event in India. I guess it's called the ET Auto Summit, but he was supposed to be one of the keynote speakers. I scoured YouTube and the internet and really couldn't find anything other than one article that mentioned two things. Number one, he avoided the bankruptcy topic, which I get it. Bankruptcy is a court process, right? It's a legal process. And so I get it. He may not legally be able to comment specifically about that. But then the other thing that it mentioned was that he was there and discussed engineering sustainable vehicles and cleaner mobility and the difference in sensory experience between ICE and EVs, which sounds like an interesting topic when you think about the Ioniq 5N, right? And all of the cool capabilities that they've brought into that vehicle that's unique to EVs and shows kind of what's possible. So in an alternate universe, I would have appreciated hearing more about that subject, but he showed up virtually, I guess, over Zoom or some other, virtual medium. And he had, the article I saw had a photo of him on video, and he had a poster of Kill Bill behind him. So I don't know about you, but I know in a virtual meeting setting, I took the time to make sure I understood what was in my background, right? Even when I'm in the car doing a virtual meeting, I pay attention to my background. So what was he trying to say with the Kill Bill thing? I think if anybody can read between those lines, it'd be you, Adam.
For him to show up anywhere and say anything, how do you trust this person? And just to keep myself out of trouble, I'm just going to keep it all in the form of a question. How do you trust this person? How do you find a way to believe anything this person says? There's just, and obviously he was going to avoid the bankruptcy. I had people on Patreon messaging me, hey, I can't find anything about what he's going to talk about or what he said at the summit, like maybe right after or right during the time it was going on. And I'm like, there's nothing that's going to be said. If you're interested in Fisker, that's not the summit for you. And hey man, may Bill rest in peace. We'll just go there. I hope Bill can rest in peace.
Yeah. I watched another video earlier today that talked about the bankruptcy. Obviously, everybody's reporting on Fisker having filed bankruptcy this week. And that's one of the things that was mentioned in this particular video. I think it was Miss Go Electric, The Current, where she goes through the news of the week. Um, and she even mentioned pretty drawings, which I think you made note of in one of your earlier videos. Let's not conflate Henrik and his pretty drawings with this guy ever having the opportunity to start another car company. All right. So hopefully that's not something we'll have to deal with. But I thought it was interesting that his content in that summit was all around the future of EVs, whether it was engineering sustainable vehicles and cleaner mobility, right? And then talking about bringing in the sensory experience into EVs that, we've come to know from a long time now with ICE vehicles.
Once again, my opinion, one last paycheck. That's all if you want to know my opinion of that summit for him, it was one last paycheck.
Well, hopefully we won't be seeing or hearing much more of him, and this can be, put in the past, hopefully well documented as I don't know, maybe a Harvard Business Review case study on mismanagement of a startup company. Some of the narrative out there is that it's indicative of the broader EV startup landscape. And I flatly disagree with that. I don't know if you've heard some of those comments out there and what your thoughts are on it.
The only difference between Fisker and everybody else that gets conned is that they actually produced what they said they were going to produce. There's no other difference. This happens all day, every day. Private equity is built and designed around this happening. There would be no private equity industry if it weren't for people like Henrik Fisker and companies like Fisker Inc. That's my opinion.
Well, I've said it, right? This is the biggest mistake I've ever made. So I've acknowledged that. I've hopefully fixed it and addressed it, learned from it. And now I'm happy to move forward, and hopefully others in the community can do so, even if they're continuing to live with the ocean.
Yeah, and I have a degree in finance, and this has been kind of a real world, I guess, case study for me in, what's the worst way to do it. We both know that this was just a horrible, not only personal decision for us, I agree with you, worst financial decision I ever made, but it has helped me learn how the landscape works, let's say on the dark side of the finance industry. And finally, for those people who are stuck, because I know you just mentioned people who are stuck, if you have an arbitration decision, there's going to have to be additional legal action probably for you to go in as a creditor and try to fight for some of that money. If you have the car and you don't want the car anymore, call Chase and tell them you don't feel safe driving it and see what they say. If I had a 2017 Honda CRV that I can, I make about the same amount of money payment on, that I can get in, hopping over top of that bad credit decision, and I can be completely gone of this car and maybe work on jumping back into the EV industry at a later time. What I can't quantify in this video and what I can't emotionally turn into words is the lack of anxiety I currently have now. I have none. Literally none. And I had so much with that car. So much. And even though I had an outlet, like I have an outlet, I can get on here and I can talk to you guys every day about how I'm feeling and what I'm feeling. And I feel like some people used my outlet as their own. But at the same time, it's just, that wasn't enough. I suffered emotionally from this car. And that was really, and that's really my point here, is that you can't put a dollar value on emotional suffering. And that was my main reason to escape, considering since you just were mentioning yours. That's why I had to do it.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that, man. One of the comments I read last night in the forum from the person who mentioned that, the trade-in value they got this past week was $15K. He mentioned some of the things that he missed about the car. Right, his new vehicle doesn't have the same amount of range, things like that. But he also mentioned, man, it just feels good to not have to deal with the drama. Right, that was the word he used. So, yeah, it's good to put that behind us. but we definitely don't want to end this podcast on that note. And I see that you're wearing a really cool shirt. I was kicking myself for not wearing mine, the one that you were kind enough to create and give to me. So I appreciate that. But let's talk about EV etiquette for a minute or two here.
Yeah, sure. It's a brand new thing, and I want to thank those who have been responsive. A few people have ordered a sticker from me, and if you want a shirt, this was literally my first shirt idea. When I showed this to Brian, him and his wife got together and said, "Hey, why don't we put EV in front of it?" And so that's how EV etiquette came to be. I shared the idea with Brian, and he said, "You know what? Hey, let's add this to the beginning," and then went in and did a new logo, and it's just kicking off. Really, what it is a way for you to sign up to be courteous in the EV charging landscape. There's a lot of troubles out there. I know there was just an out of spec video about people cutting the cords for like $15 worth of copper. I don't want to comment any further on that, but there's a lot of ways that we can be nice to people at an EV charger. The very first time I charged at Electrify America, I drove there and 2 of the machines were down. And I did it just to test my Tesla, my CCS adapter, at an Electrify America. That was the only reason I was there. And I didn't need to charge at all. And when the third vehicle pulled up, which obviously wasn't going to have a place to charge, there was a Bolt charging and there was me, and there were only 2 functional stations. I immediately moved my car because I thought, well, if I can travel on the way home, either because I have enough range or I have another place to charge, I'm just going to get out of their way. And I'm not saying to sacrifice yourself for the needs of someone else. That's the last thing I want to do. And I also want to acknowledge everybody's situation is different. And if you're on a trip where you need to charge to 100, maybe you have a Volvo XC40 recharge, and this particular leg is one that you need all that 200 miles of range to get, totally fine. But what I want to say about it is that it is a little club that you can join either by getting a sticker or just showing other people the video. And that's really what I want to give people an opportunity to do, is to represent something that is healthy for the EV charging landscape. And if you have somebody that's, sitting at a charger that's 100%, and you happen to see them when they return to their vehicle, you can say something like, "Hey, have you ever checked out EV etiquette? Maybe you should learn more." And that's it. And the 5 guidelines are there. They're not rules. And what they are suggestions on how you can get a better charging experience, not only for yourself, but for everyone else. The charging landscape is new, but it can be improved with our own efforts. And obviously, just like anything else, you vote with your wallet. You follow the ways that you believe in anything. And with this, I believe in a more courteous future in the EV charging landscape. I hope that was succinct enough.
No, man, I appreciate the work that you did on EV etiquette. Rumors of EV adoption demise have been grossly exaggerated, right? We're going to sell more EVs in 2024 than we have ever in history, right? So EV adoption continues to grow. What slowed is the rate of adoption, right? So that's point one.
Right.
But in the face of growing EV adoption, which is the truth of the matter, it's all about educating folks that are just getting into EVs, and it's looking to ensure a better experience for everybody, right? And I think those 2 simple things really underscore what EV etiquette is all about. So I don't know why anybody wouldn't want to be a part of this, right? There is some cynicism out there in terms of people are going to be set in their ways and they're going to do what they're going to do. But all we can do is look to be the change that we want to see in the world, right? And help others understand, there's very few edge cases where you really need to charge beyond 80%. And if there's a line at the charger, right, you really want to limit charging to 80% and move on down the road to another charging location, right? The infrastructure is only continuing to improve and create more and more opportunities like that. So I love what it's all about, and it gives me a construct within which now to engage with folks when I run into them at chargers, and they're sitting there at 85, 95% state of charge.
Yeah, and honestly, that's why I wanted to do it. Is so, what's the conversation starter? Because I was at a charger, it was completely full. A guy was going up to every person and asking them, "Hey, do you like your car?" Which, that's a cool conversation starter, and you can learn about their vehicle. But when you ask somebody, "Hey, have you ever heard about EV etiquette?" Even if you never get any further, you've put the number in there, And a final thought on it, and I appreciate you taking some time on your podcast to let me talk about it. I really, really sincerely appreciate it. But final thought on this is that this is why I adopted a splash and dash mentality with all charging. Like, I charge to whatever my travel percentage is at home, and then I'm 40 to 60 the whole trip. I stop at every charger and I charge for a couple minutes. Yes, it increases the length of my trip, but at any time, if I come to a charger and it's not available, I can just keep going. And so when you find that charger, okay, I found one, there's nobody here, it's, whatever the ideal situation is for you, then maybe, yeah, you can stay and get as much charge as you need. But in the event that you pull up to one and there's a line, which I know you probably experience way more than me. In fact, I don't even drive by EVs where I live. But if you find a situation where, hey, this is not ideal, just keep it moving, and that's why I will never adopt the 10 to 80 mentality. I just won't. And it's for this reason exactly. In the event that the infrastructure isn't ready for me, I'm ready for it.
Yeah, well, the fact that you live in somewhat of an EV fast charging desert, I'm sure contributed to that type of approach, right? To stop at every single charger you can. I'm the total opposite, right? I'm looking to go from charging to 100% overnight, driving it down to about 10%, getting to my charger, topping it up to 80, and going, right? That's how we do road trips here. But yeah, like I said, I'm looking forward to using the EV etiquette construct to engage with other EV owners out there, and hopefully seeing this thing continue to proliferate. Now, along the lines of EV charging, one of the things that Rivian did was they added the ability to see or to filter your charging on a road trip by the rating, right? They implemented a rating system of A all the way to F, right? Based on the availability of the charger, how fast you're able to charge, and some other data points that go into that rating system. But they also recently just came up with Gen 2 of the R1T and R1S. So I don't know if you saw those, but I was pretty impressed with what I saw there. And they're not even calling it a refresh, but there was a lot to consume. And what I'm really excited about is a lot of that is going to be supposedly by the end of June delivered to us existing owners via OTA.
Yeah, I think Rivian's done a really good job with taking what they have and making it, as usable, as functional, and kind of as diverse as possible. I know you and I have talked a lot about the Nerd data available there, and just though I think the Nerd screen maybe you have a better word for it, but there's so much data available within the Rivian. The rating system is excellent. I believe they purchased a better route planner. Side note on the exact same topic, I saw an ad for Rivian today for the first time ever. I've never seen an ad for Rivian, but on a video I was watching, I got an ad for it. But the changes seem to me to be multiple and significant, even though there's not a physical change. It's all about the software, and Rivian's done a really good job just putting everything together. The only beef I have with Rivian is open up the Adventure Network. Everything you stand for is null and void to me if you don't open up your Adventure Network. That is, I have many negative thoughts about that. That's all I'll say there.
Well, I'll tell you this. By and large, I agree with you. But as a Rivian owner, I love the fact that we have exclusivity right now with the Rivian Adventure Network. I just wish there was more to it, right? There really aren't any Rivian Adventure Network sites up here in the Northeast, right? We're on Cape Cod right now, and that stretch between like Delaware and Massachusetts and further points further north, they haven't rolled out. So let's let them continue the rollout of Adventure Network sites. And they have already said they're going to open it up to other EV manufacturers, right? Other EVs will be able to use that as an option. Yesterday, we were in southern Boston, as I mentioned earlier, and the Rivian routing system sent me to a Tesla charging site. Now, I don't have the adapter yet to go from Tesla to CCS. And I wasn't sure that there was a way for me to look up easily within the Rivian navigation to see if that was a magic dock. Turns out it absolutely was. But I had an issue where I was not able to get the dock to detach. And so I wasn't able to have a successful charge at that location. So it's something that I'm going to have to go test out here in Provincetown. There is another Magic Dock site that's now open, so I'm going to have to go up there and check it out. But it's one of the things I'm looking at to see if there's a bigger issue with some of these Magic Docks not functioning the way they're supposed to. I fully admit it could be user error, but there was another driver there who came up and was watching me, and I asked him, why he was doing it, and he said, "Yeah, I tried to do it, had the same issue." So it wasn't just an issue with me. There was at least one other that couldn't. So definitely looking to see that. One other point on the Rivian Gen 2 of the R1. You mentioned there aren't any physical changes in terms of the way the vehicles look. The thing that's super important, though, is that all the motors now are, instead of a third-party Bosch motors, such as the ones that are on our vehicle, these are all in-house. I think they call them Enduro motors. The changes that they've made directly align to their ability to be profitable, and they're telling the market that we anticipate having hit profitability by the end of 2024. All right, so they just made those changes here in calendar Q2, and it's going to result in profitability by calendar Q4. That part of it is super impressive, right? And so having just talked about Fisker and solvency, Rivian's one of those that, they're not nearly in as bad a situation, but they've got to get to profitability. And so these changes help them get there. And it seems like they're not going to leave existing owners behind, right? We'll get as much of those changes via over-the-air update as is feasible with the hardware that we have. So very much looking forward to that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that that vertical integration is just one step on the highway of getting to profitability. And unless you're working towards that, even if Fisker was going to do that in some kind of side-winding way in partnership with another automaker, but I do feel like that step in that direction is extremely important, not only for profitability, but for longevity as a company, as you have more control. Speaking of profitability, how do you feel about the profitability of the charging industry? Is that something that must be achieved, or is that something that needs to be addressed in another way? How do you feel about charging and how, because obviously profitability is not a thing when it comes to charging networks, at least right now. And there's been a lot of struggles there. What's the fix?
Yeah, so I think a big part of it is how that power is generated. Right. A lot of it isn't renewable, right? In some cases, we've seen charging providers. I know Mercedes, for example, their design of their charging sites is looking to use solar, right, in order to supply or at least augment the power that they're delivering. So I think the use of renewable solar in particular is one of the ways to get there, but it's one of those things that I think will have to be subsidized for a period of time before you get to a place where it becomes profitable. I think of all the providers out there, Tesla probably has the best opportunity to be profitable with their charging network, just based on the fact that, you know, they've reached a point of economies of scale, having had the supercharger network in the ground for as long as it has been, and now other manufacturers are paying them for their customers to gain access. So I think they've got an opportunity to sort of prove the model and then get others on board. And I just want to underscore that when I talk about subsidizing public charging, I don't know how many years we've had gasoline as a fuel source, but that number is probably triple digit in terms of the number of years, and we're still subsidizing those oil companies, even though on a quarterly basis, they're making double-digit billions in profits, right? So that's just for context in terms of what we're talking about here, but that's kind of where I see it right now.
Yeah, absolutely, excellent point on the subsidy. If you're not okay with subsidized EV charging, you also need to be not okay with subsidized oil, which is that's $1 trillion subsidy worldwide and a $20 billion subsidy in the United States. So extremely good points there, Brian. I appreciate your insights. I know that wasn't on the docket for today, but man, I really appreciate you providing your insights there. That's some food for thought, if you will.
Yeah, that's a whole other tangent we could go down there with Ford also this week sort of giving up on their Model E program, at least as it relates to dealer investments to participate, right, with their EVs. So I'm going to kind of watch it and see. But yeah, it was disappointing to see that Ford dealers at least no longer need to, invest in sending salespeople to training, as well as service techs to training specifically around EVs. They also no longer need to invest in charging infrastructure at the dealership. So we'll see if not mandating it means that they're just not going to do it, or if they're still going to do the right thing in order to create the best experience for EV customers and really go all in. So that remains to be seen. So it'll be interesting to see.
What I will say about Ford, and I appreciate that, they have made that change, but what I will say about Ford is that there's no longer a longer stretch than 75 miles in West Virginia without a charger, thanks to Ford. There are about 5 Ford dealerships in West Virginia that have installed DC fast charging, one centrally located right on Route 50 and I-79, and several others that did join that program and have basically saved the ability to travel in West Virginia, period. So as much as Ford has taken that away, Ford has made it possible to travel in my prologue, period. So thank you to Ford for that. So the fact that they did implement that at one time has really been helpful.
Now, speaking of your prologue, right, to close this out here, that's one of the EVs now that has like a white hot lease deal that's available on it, along with the Ioniq 6, right? So did you see the prologue lease deal?
I don't remember the specific numbers. I have seen the deal, but it's $300 and some a month. Yeah, it's excellent. Once again, I'm not going to complain about my deal I got on the prologue. I probably got one of the first in the entire Northeast part of the country, number one. Number two, I got rid of an absolute burden emotionally on my life. So once again, can't put a dollar value on that. But yeah, it's definitely something to consider. I just turned over 2,000 miles today or yesterday. So I've done a significant amount of driving in the car, and it has one bug, and that's if you unplug it without a power cycle from a charger and you plug it in to a different charger, and these are level 1s and 2s, with a different source of power, it will say it cannot accept a charge. But it actually does accept a charge. So that's the only software bug I've encountered on this car. The width of it, I just did a wedding. I DJ weddings, and so I take a lot of equipment places, and the Prologue is now my choice of vehicle for that. And the width of this vehicle, once again, I cannot impress enough how wide this vehicle is, but the width of it and the way that the rear hatch is oriented, the fact that it's basically flat compared to the slope of what was the Model Y that I was using before, it is just unbelievably vast with the amount of space that you have to stack stuff in there. Here's my question about the lease. I've got people who have purchased Prologues. They've made a trade on their Ocean like a month ago. They gave them the Ocean. They signed the papers and they still don't have their car. Where are the Prologues? I've never seen one on a lot other than the one I purchased.
Yeah, I don't remember where I was, but someone sent me a photo of, one of those double-decker car haulers with a delivery to our local Honda dealer in Silver Spring there in the auto park, having received something like 7 or 8 of them on that car hauler, right? But this was only a few weeks ago, right? So I think they're just now starting to get those in the hands of dealers, and hopefully they can get them prepped and in the hands of customers quickly, because it is a seemingly a great EV, and it definitely looks like a Honda. All right, so hopefully we can get those vehicles prepped and ready for delivery, because it's a great option, as you well know, for anybody that's looking to get into an EV or certainly looking to get out of the Ocean. That's a great option.
Yeah, the only thing and everybody is going to tell me over and over again that they need 785,000 horsepower and they need 0 to 60 in 1.3 milliseconds. Okay. And the Prologue does not do that. But I found that I don't drive that way ever in this car. So, if you're somebody who if you need 500 plus horsepower in your car or 400, the Prologue isn't for you. It's not fast. It doesn't accelerate fast. But if you drive it efficiently, I did a 75-mile trip 3 days ago, and that 75-mile trip at 90 degrees out with the climate control on was
4.2
miles per kilowatt hour. So for those that say it's not efficient, it's all about how you drive. And there's no way to drive it super inefficiently because that power just isn't there. And I found that there's no excitement driving it fast. But once again, that's the only complaint I have about the Prologue, that and the price, which now we've already discussed is like that. And the other thing I want to add on the end of that is that price parity is here. If you go to the Jeep dealership right now, a Grand Cherokee is $50,000. That's what the ticket on a Grand Cherokee mid-trim is right now, $50,000. There is no EV that you get that is $50,000 at this point. They are all under that in that competitive class, in that mid-size crossover SUV. So price parity is here. And Brian, you made a good point last time we spoke that the used market also is just, it's unbelievably cheap if you're looking at, because we came from the other reason that people say, EV prices are falling and values. Yeah, absolutely. They're falling because 2022 was the most expensive automobile in the history of the earth. And it probably will be for a long time because it was an unprecedented global pandemic / chip shortage / supply chain debacle. So when there's a correction, which we've now had, now you can see what it really is like. And it's just as competitive as it was. Cars are no longer an investment. You can't have a car flipping business. And, here we are, price parity. If you want an EV and you want a gas car and you compare age, mileage, values, they're the same.
Yeah, this was always going to be the year where that happened, right? Last year, there was still a $5,000 to $10,000 difference, right, between the average price of a new car and the average price of an EV. But with some of the additions that we're seeing to the EV marketplace this year, I can totally see that price parity being here. So it's very, very exciting. Unfortunately, the Fed just said that it doesn't appear that they're going to be lowering any interest rates anytime soon. So that's the other shoe that needs to drop to some extent, right, to facilitate and drive adoption. Because whether it's an EV or any vehicle, right, where interest rates are today, it makes it very difficult from an affordability standpoint. So hopefully that will change in hopefully the fourth quarter of this year as we come out of the election and have a sense of, the direction moving forward. So I guess that's probably a good place for us to leave it here today. I appreciate you carving out some time on your anniversary weekend here, Adam, to get together for our podcast. Folks, if you've enjoyed this, please hit the like button, subscribe, check out Adam's Everything EV for very best reporting, and I do mean reporting because he is very well researched on Fisker and any other topic he chooses to pursue. You can expect that it's going to be very well researched and it's going to be entertaining. So I appreciate the continued collaboration, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Thanks, Brian.